You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, October 3rd. Today is World Temperance Day, National Child Health Day, Global Smoothie Day, National Boyfriend Day, and of course, that means it's National Fuckboy Day also, National Techies Day, National Consignment Day for everyone in cannabis. And thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms, especially YouTube. We're live every Monday through Friday on YouTube and audio only on Clubhouse. And if you are in Clubhouse, you can also participate in the show by raising your hand if you have a brief comment on the story most recently presented. We are experiencing some audio issues on Clubhouse, and so I'm hoping this is working right. But without it, and that's the case, I will share the link to the YouTube room and encourage everyone to come over to that space. But without further ado, let's pay a quick bill so we can get right back to the news.
At True Classic OG, we live by one motto: stay true. We stay true to our legacy cut of True OG that's always fresh, piney, gassy, and delicious. We represent the spirit, hustle, and diversity of our great city of angels. And we stay true to the spirit of this plant, doing everything in-house to ensure that you get the highest quality and consistency with every batch. And that's what's made us LA's favorite OG. True Classic OG. Stay true, Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's Monday morning. We're getting live and direct. And to start it off today, we have the dope dad himself. That's right, Rico Lamitte. When he's not babysitting and playing shell games with children and sharing paste, you can find him doing that same ass shit with grown-ass adults at a TEDx convention, doing grown-ass adult babysitting and changing adult diapers. That's right. And when he's not doing anything like that, you can find him brushing up on his football skills, trying to work on his dad bod while he's constantly backpedaling on Safe Banking and Safe Banking Plus. That's right. It is none other than the dope dad himself, Rico Lamitte.
Yeah, Jason, it's Medical Monday. Thank you for another fantastic intro, and welcome back, everyone out there watching, listening, and everybody who's been getting high at 9 with us every single morning. My headline today is from the shoestring.org. OSHA. Holyoke marijuana worker died from inhalation of ground cannabis dust, ironically, written by Dusty Christensen. Maybe Cannabumps was a bad idea after all. I first saw this headline on IG post yesterday by Weed Week, later followed by a more detailed summation in a post on their website. But after a little digging, I found a full article by Massachusetts-based news blog, theshoestring.org, and saw my friend Mike Crawford, what up, Mike, the popular New England Cannabis Midnight Mass podcast from the Young Jerks, streamed on the Revelation, even interviewing the deceased's father on his weekly show last weekend. So let's dive into what happened. Federal regulators allege 27-year-old Lorna McMurray died January 7, 2022 after inhaling keef at a large indoor grow operation in Holyoke, Massachusetts, owned by multi-state operator Trulieve. As with all workplace-related deaths, OSHA was brought in to investigate and stated in a public summary, a Trulieve employee was grinding cannabis and packaging it into pre-rolled joints when she complained that she couldn't breathe and she was killed due to the hazards of ground cannabis dust, end quote. In June, OSHA hit Trulieve with 3 fines totaling $35,219, $8,219 for violations related to the death, a violation of federal regulations requiring companies maintain a written hazard communication plan, failure to keep safety data sheets on hazardous chemicals, and failure to provide information on training for said chemicals. The MSO swiftly contested all three, and Truly is permitted to grow up to 80,000 square feet of cannabis in its Holyoke cultivation and production facility, supplying product to 3 Massachusetts retail stores. Both the Shoestring and Weed Week say True Leaves executive director of corporate communications did not return multiple phone and email messages left Saturday. Now here's why local coverage is so damn important when looking for more color on root causes to tragedies like this. And further proof, 10 out of 10 times you want answers to quote unquote mysteries you actually care about. All you got to do is follow the damn money. The Shoestring also reported city officials in Holyoke bet big on the industry, working to attract cannabis businesses to the paper city's many vacant industrial properties. Cultivators were drawn to the town by its abundantly available commercial property and cheap electricity, which we all know are the 2 largest costs for indoor grows. Holyoke's also one of the country's first planned industrial cities, providing incredibly low electric rates due to its dam and municipal canal system. In total, Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission granted 72 licenses to retail, cultivation, and manufacturing businesses operating in Holyoke, almost double the 37 licenses allotted to Boston, who can officially claim the second place title for highest number of licenses. The Shoestring says they reached Holyoke Mayor Joshua Garcia via text Sunday afternoon, and he said it was the first time he'd heard about the True Leaf facility death, and he did not have enough information to comment. The newly revealed charges are not the first violation cases levied by OSHA against True Leaf in recent history. In March, the MSO settled one in Reading, Pennsylvania, after being cited for violating regulation requiring companies to report on employees' inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. And back in 2019, they were cited for violating respiratory protection and hazard communication regulations at a grow facility in Quincy, Florida. As MSOs continue to expand and build massive facilities globally, it was only a matter of time before we'd hear of the first deaths at their sites. I think it is an easy case to make in favor of unionization efforts, at the very least for large cultivation facilities or potentially hazardous jobs across cannabis supply chain. The Holyoke True Leaf facility was not unionized, and the victim's family stands alone should they choose to fight for monetary damages against the multi-billion-dollar corporation who brought much-needed jobs and tax revenue to a dying industrial town, essentially becoming their savior when locals needed it most. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News, and I'm very interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts on this one.
Oh,
Well,
man.
Go ahead,
ahead,
Jason.
Gretchen.
I was just going to say, Dr. Felicia, is this a thing? Is someone really dying from cannabis dust? Is that something you can autopsy and figure out?
You know what I think it is, Gretchen? I think they suddenly passed from too much mold inhalation from all that boof-ass weed they grow.
Okay.
So, well, it is a thing. It's not just cannabis, though. It's any kind of particulate dust, like asbestos. Think about asbestos.
Right.
Wood, grain, flour. I mean, our lungs are meant to breathe in air, some fragrances, but there is particulate matter that can get stuck in the alveoli and suffocate you. Or over time, the chronic inflammation can cause trouble. It's not just cannabis, though. It's any particulate matter.
I
But is
just
it
want to say,
possible to pinpoint that it's cannabis is my question, I guess.
I'm sure it probably is if they do some
It's
type
super
of
sad.
Electron microscopy and do the DNA I'm sure they can tell us cannabis once they get in there with her lungs and sample it. Yeah.
so regardless to whether or not they're able to actually tell if it is or is not cannabis, one of the things that I'm hearing in this, I do compliance for the cannabis industry. It's literally what I focus on. OSHA and pesticide safety are 2 of my main strong suits. And everyone literally tells me that I'm like Chicken Little, like I'm fucking the sky is falling. I'm like, look, guys, we need respiratory protocols. And one of the biggest things that I notice is missing in these facilities, especially in trim, is clear understanding of respiratory protocols and what the difference is between a respirator and a face mask and understanding the particulate and the NIOSH regulations in regards to the different classifications of types of respiration required. Next step is having to make sure that every single person who is wearing a respirator has had their appropriate medical fit test as well, the medical examination as well as the fit test on their respirator. And had they had all of those things, even if they could, they would have at least been doing the due diligence and the good business practices to show that they had all of the steps being considered. And that's something that's missing. And I really hope that everybody in the industry hears that, because regardless to whether or not it actually was the cannabis dust's fault, had they been managing this correctly, they would have already had a ton of protocols for this, and it wouldn't have been such a crazy issue. And they probably would have already had some way to handle it the moment that somebody said that, because in the way of OSHA and in the way of respiratory safety, the moment somebody says something or has any issues like that, you have to address it. And they did not handle that correctly. So regardless.
To your question, Gretchen, if you watch The Young Jerks or Midnight Mass, which is Mike Crawford, I tried to get him on the show this morning. I think I was too late at hollering him last night, but he has it's a really, really heartfelt conversation with the victim's father. And it seems that he actually works at a diesel factory, and she was complaining of dust inhalation and was borrowing his respirators from his actual facility, and
which is terrible.
And he was very, very choice with his words. He did not want to blame True Leave directly, because obviously what I said in the story, they came out and saved this town. A lot of these cannabis facilities came out there and saved a dying town, and they provided so many jobs. They provided a lot of tax revenue for that, and he's very, very, very careful with his words not to outright call them out. But without a union, she doesn't really have a horse in this race. You really can't fight back against them and not feel the full force of their billions of dollars in the bank. And then also the community is going to be against them too, because it's going to fuck up their chance to get jobs as well. So I really do think that this is a huge case for unionization, at the very least, when you're working at an MSO, because shit like this happens, you cannot fight back. You will lose. And they only got fined $35,000 by OSHA for 3 violations, and somebody was killed. That's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's significant other, and they're no longer with us. And this was swept under the rug, and they didn't say shit about it since January. Period.
The fact that they were wearing somebody else's respirator right there is like the biggest fucking fuck you to your employees I've ever heard in my life. If you're not properly providing the right respirator for each individual employee, they are supposed to have their own, and it needs to be fit tested to their face. That is their respirator. You don't share respirators. That is yours. You clean it, you bag it, you make sure it's serviced. You don't have more than 30 hours on your fucking on your filters. There's strong regulations on this, and the fact that she was borrowing her dad's, that's so sad, Rico. I didn't realize that. That's the most fuck you, truly. Fuck you guys.
Real sad.
So has Kim Rivers released an official statement in regards to this?
They still have not released any statement to it. Both Weed Week and the Shoestring were waiting for comments from them on Saturday. Multiple calls, multiple emails were unanswered. And then Weed Week actually got a hold of their PR people, and they said that they were preparing a statement, but at the time of their published story, they did not have one prepared to put out into the cannabis universe.
And to not have a respirator protocol in the middle of COVID when people are asking for masks is the most fucking insane thing I've ever. When people tell me that, I'm like, you guys realize you have to follow these protocols just because you're using chemicals or dusts or any of these things. But now COVID has happened. And if you've gone through 2 years of people explaining how you have to cover your fucking face and nobody's figured out this part, that's just negligence in my mind. That's gross negligence. If I were auditing that as far as a compliance side, that's fucked up.
Nicole, when companies open up in states, are they given all of the guidelines and regulations, including OSHA, that they're supposed to follow?
Yep, absolutely. You're supposed to take you're supposed to take specific OSHA required classes. OSHA 30 is in almost every single state. It's required that at least 2 people have an OSHA 30 training, and that's basic law, safety, fucking slip fall, breathing, electric, basic OSHA 30. You have to have 2 people. And then on top of that, when you're utilizing any pesticide to kill anything at all, you have to have somebody who has had a private applicator license in every state, throughout all 50 states, through the Department of Agriculture, that shows that you know how to fucking handle chemicals. And that person's ultimately responsible to make sure that the masks are managed correctly.
Well, I'm sorry for this family's loss, but I'm sure there's going to be an attorney that will step
I
in
hope
and
there's a
help
pro
them.
bono attorney, and
Oh,
everyone
there
who's
will
listening
definitely be one.
in cannabis land that doesn't have a respirator protocol, get one today. Manage that. Have that in fucking place immediately, and have respirators available in boxes at all times, fresh boxes of all sizes available. If you're an expanding team, I'd say have 5 to 10 of every size respirator, brand new in a box, waiting for your new staff at all times, and in case somebody breaks theirs or needs it.
How many filters should they keep on hand, Nicole?
They're 30-hour filters, but some states require that you flip them every 3 uses. Some cities, Los Angeles being one of them, require you flip it every use. Every time you spray a pesticide using a NIOSH liquid filter mask or a mist filter mask, you have to change it every single time per the county of Los Angeles. But it goes up, the state says follow the rules. The 3M usually puts somewhere between 20 and 40 hours on any respirator tank.
Nicole dropping knowledge bombs today.
Well, I thank
I miss
you,
Union-
Rico
unionized,
and
unionized.
Nicole.
Union, bro. Union. Like, you're so right. Rico, you're so fucking right. Like, this and like the ability to just completely destroy the agricultural side of it. Those two things, like, if we don't manage that correctly, like, we're just gonna look like trash bags like the rest of the fucking world.
Oh,
Right.
dirt bags.
There's plenty of danger across the supply chain, and you have to protect yourself. And if you're going to be working at these dangerous jobs in the cannabis industry, you need to be unionized, period, because you are not going to be able to fight against any of these MSOs. And sadly, that is the downside of capitalism. And at the end of the day, a lot of these MSOs are going to be the only companies left to work at in a couple of years.
Well, that's a really good transition, Rico, going into my story, because these MSO companies might not have enough money to do anything.
Well, I'll go ahead and segue on the dirt bag. My very favorite dirt bag, Mr. Jason Beck, also the longest running retailer in the history of the world in cannabis, and also the member of any political party that might piss you off. What do you have today to stir some shit up, Jason?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't actually need to stir anything up, because this article is enough stir up, I think, for the entire cannabis industry. On the verge of the IRS bringing on all of these thousands and thousands of agents that are going to be carrying guns and ready to kill. So today, my headline starts off with this: 10 multi-state cannabis companies owe $500 million in federal taxes. If the companies paid their federal tax bills, only one of the 10 would have more than 10 months worth of cash for operations. 10 publicly traded multi-state cannabis companies are carrying over $500 million in federal tax debts, according to analysis of financial filings by Green Market Report. All told, multi-state operators MSO Acreage Holding, Ascend Wellness, AYR Wellness, Cresco Labs, Columbia Care, Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, TerraSend, TrueLeave, who was just mentioned in the previous story, and Verano Holdings all owe the Internal Revenue Service an eye-popping, get ready for this, $507,193,000, according to their second quarter financial reports. Just two of the companies, Curaleaf and Verano, hold the bulk of the tax debt. Combined, they owe the IRS $286 million. Not only that, but if the companies were forced to pay off their full federal tax bills, only one of the 10, Green Thumb Industries, would have more than 10 months worth of cash left with which to continue operating. Verano Holdings would be financially underwater in a big way, with $161.4 million owed to the IRS compared to $92.8 million cash on hand, meaning it owes 78% more in taxes than it has in cash in hand at the end of the second quarter. And it's not clear when the companies plan on paying. Much or perhaps all of the tax debts have been deliberately not paid by companies so that the businesses can use the cash to fund operations or other plans, multiple sources said. Part of our capital allocation strategy is to tighten our tax payment cadence, Verano CEO George Arctos explained to shareholders in an earnings call last month. The strategy is not unique to Verano and has been utilized amongst other large U.S. companies. The cost of penalties and interest for those are significantly below the average cost of debt. Arcos also noted that the company made a $37 million income tax payment in Q2 and that Verano has already paid $14 million in taxes for Q3. We continually to efficiently manage our income tax payable line and continue to manage as a cheap source of capital and generally keep about a trailing 12 to 18-month balance outstanding, Arco said. That financial squeeze, which often results in real-world tax rate of up to 80 to 90% for marijuana businesses and little to no profit, has led companies desperate for cash to undertake creative financing for expansion or even just to continue daily operations. Delaying tax payments as a financing strategy can be a major risk in both the short and long term, several industry experts warned. One says, I totally get it. And at the same time, I totally think it's a very risky strategy because it's like Russian roulette, said Roxanne Pizer, a partner at Denver-based Fortis Law, who has worked with legal marijuana companies for over a decade. Morgan Paxia, co-founder of San Francisco-based Poseidon Investment Management, said she's got concerns about the proliferation of that type of financing strategy because he thinks it's a high wire act that's tough to pull off. Intentionally now running up 280E tax debt as a means of conserving cash, ideally, that's your last lever. And if you're going to pull that lever, it's got to be very well managed, tightly managed. There's got to be a clear plan and a high profitability of executing against it. Otherwise, I think you go upside down, Paxia said. I personally agree with him. I think they're all going to go upside down, but let's continue. Paxia said the range of credit interest from private lenders these days is running about 12 to 14% for those with good credit and upwards of 16 to 20% for those whose credit is less than stellar. By contrast, IRS interest for deferred taxes is only 3% plus the prime short-term federal interest rate, which as of Monday was 6.25% for a total of 9.25%. That makes IRS interest rates far cheaper than private capital. The problem with the strategy is simply not paying the IRS is that the bill will eventually come due, perhaps as soon as next spring, although just when federal tax regulators will force the issue is the big question. What then happens with the fallout could be catastrophic, said one tax attorney who requested anonymity due to his close work with several MSOs. This guy says they have to pay their taxes sooner or later, the attorney said. They're going to fail because so many of these managers are burying their heads in the sand, and what they should be doing is coming to grips with this and taking action. What they're doing now is the worst of all possible worlds. They're saying, we admit we owe this tax and we're just not going to pay it. That's like alcoholic behavior. That's like not opening your mail, he says. Part of the problem, said Peisner, is none of these MSOs are actually profitable. Every one of them posted multi-million-dollar cash flow losses in the second quarter, which at this point is an industry standard. It stems from the fact that if you don't have enough cash flow, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So where do you get the money? How can you do that? What can you juggle? Not paying the taxes is just part of the juggling act, Pyre said, which raises the question, how long will the IRS wait until the agency will decide it's waited long enough? That's about as clear as mud, said Nick Richards, a former IRS attorney who is now a partner at Greenspoon Martyr in Denver, but he added that the agency won't wait forever. What the IRS will most likely do, he said, is work with companies to get them onto payment plans or the like, akin to the deal struck by State House Holdings in this past summer. If you have money to pay taxes, your options are really to pay the tax, Richard said. The IRS isn't going to take all your money. They'll let you into a payment plan. That's what they did for State House. But the IRS also won't let companies keep pushing out their tax bills in perpetuity, he said, pointing to Curaleaf's $125 million tax debt, and it's $187 million in the bank. The IRS is going to want them to get onto a payment plan if Curaleaf or others aren't already making some payment plans regularly, Richard said. If Curaleaf can identify why it's necessary for their ongoing business, then the IRS will cooperate with that so long as it's being used to generate income producing assets. The longer term question, Richards and others said, is whether the MSOs will eventually start turning a real profit. If they don't and the income tax bills keep piling up, the IRS may eventually lose patience. Year after year of losses becomes a problem in working with the IRS, and the IRS is going to say, why save these businesses? Richard said. Paxia noted that each company has to be evaluated individually based on more than just cash flow or tax debts. He pointed to Green Thumb Industries as the leader among MSOs for its low tax debt and high cash balance ratio, and said the company's relatively cautious approach to expansion thus far is serving it well. Even Verano, Paxia said, could likely sell off a ton of assets if the company really needed more cash with which to pay its debts. So he doesn't see the business as being in immediate danger, even with the relative lack of cash and its sky-high tax tab. It's really kind of runs the gamut, Paxia said. There are other factors that are worth taking into account. However, Paxia and others noted, including rising federal interest rates and an upcoming hiring spree at the IRS with a macro level plan to increase audits at a federal and federal revenue. There's also an industry-wide sales slowdown that's happening following the COVID bump that much of the cannabis sector enjoyed for over a year, and interest rates are going up, has already made capital even more scarce and expensive, and the new IRS agents could in part be targeting at cannabis companies, since the IRS knows that marijuana sector is a particularly lucrative for them, which means, according to the relatively optimistic Paxia, that high tax debts are going to be a problem for at least some time for these major MSOs. Well, I think this is a major problem for these MSOs. Me having dealt with the IRS and all these other tax collectors on a number of different levels for a number of years, I can tell you firsthand that the shit is going to go down. And I'm going to stay tuned with my popcorn and watch the shit fucking blow up and explode. And this is Jason Beck reporting for the High at 9 News.
Hey, Jason, I think this one is a really interesting because I tie it back to Boris Johnson, whoever the Curaleaf CEO, saying that the tobacco companies are going to be taking over anyways. Like if these MSOs are deemed not too big to fail, I think the big tobacco is just waiting in the wings to pick up the slack and just take them all and buy them all pennies on the dollar anyways.
Very well could happen, Rico. What do you think on this, Nicole?
Well, first of all, I definitely don't.
Boris
think
Jordan, not Boris Johnson. not the former UK. Thank you, Guapo. Not the former UK Prime Minister. Yeah,
I was confused for a second, but I was like, I don't understand what he meant by that. But yeah, no, I personally am curious to see, like the tax attorney was saying, how long like the IRS will actually be patient with this kind of thing. Because I mean, that's a pretty substantial number, and the IRS recently got handguns. So I'm I'm curious to see, like, it seems like low hanging fruit, in my opinion, like to go after that millions of dollars. But from what I do understand, like 80% of IRS audits are on the lower income people. So that's the other part, like that whole follow the money conversation. The majority of IRS audits are on people that make below $50,000 a year, which was the craziest shit I had ever heard in my life. Like, what the fuck, guys? Like, that's but yeah,
so
somebody that makes $50,000 or less is 10 times more likely to be audited than somebody who makes over $250,000 a year. And that's like even based on like math of how many $250,000 a year salaries there are. And I was like, that's fucked up. So I don't know. It's, to me, this is just proof that, the people that have money, those who have
it's the golden rule. The one with the gold makes the rules.
Yeah.
And they funded the IRS.
I was just going to say, when it comes to the question of too big to fail or not, I think the government will have zero problem letting these companies fail and jumping up and down saying cannabis doesn't work. This is why we should not have had it. So I think these guys are just setting up for the whole industry to be destroyed.
Yeah, like proving, like, look, they can't even pay their taxes. Even these giant companies, look at how bad they suck. That's what's gonna happen. And you're so right, Gretchen. And it's just gonna be like, a black eye for the industry. And it's like the fucking MSOs that are doing it.
And if cannabis stays alive, that's just right there.
If it stays alive, it can't die. It can't die.
Hold on, let me finish my statement. If it continues on, this is just easy for the government to say we're taking it over, and you're gonna have state-run markets.
100, yeah.
And so like Washington,
like Canada,
like New York,
even worse.
Yeah, like your state is going to control, like a state store, how your cannabis is run.
Yep, that's how New York's gonna be. I think we're gonna see that happen in New York.
Tons of boof weed funded by the government.
Jason, thank you so
Yeah.
much for this story. I'm curious, is the IRS this patient with small operators?
No,
Fuck
not
no.
even in the slightest, Dr. Felicia. I've
Fuck
dealt
no,
with the
they're pieces of
IRS.
shit.
Yeah, I have dealt with the IRS in regards to this over the years. And let me tell you something: they are not nice to deal with. But I'll tell you who's even worse to deal with is the CDFTA, better known as the SBOE. And those are the nastiest people to deal with as a tax debt that you will ever have to deal with in your life.
The local control on tax for state level over federal level is definitely a little bit scarier for us as operators right now.
Yeah, I've had till taps, all kinds of crazy shit happen to me over the years, and
What's
it
a till
is
tap?
nothing nice. A till tap is the same thing that recently happened to the Jungle Boys that they were trying to cry as a raid, which was total bullshit. It was a till tap. They go in there, take their money, and get the fuck out.
Yeah.
So it's a robbery.
No, it's not a robbery. It's a till tap.
It's a licensed robbery. It's a compliant robbery. If robbery was compliant, that is it.
It's a compliant robbery.
So it's what the far right is saying that the IRS is about to do to the rest of America, right?
Exactly right. Exactly what they are going to do, because and
they're
they're going to have guns and they're going to shoot to kill.
The IRS is the far right is very correct on this. They're not.
Yes, that's right. And hearing that from the left, that the far right is right.
The far right is right on this.
Yep.
On this, I'm going to say on this.
There's three sides to every coin. I prefer to live on the edge. So as a felon. She called herself a lady in the streets, but a freak in the spreadsheets, an ag and efficiency expert, and self-described general data bitch. Coming to the stage next, it's Nicole West. Welcome back. What you got for us on this beautiful Monday morning?
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My headline today is actually coming out of The Guardian, and it's about Amsterdam considering banning cannabis tourists from its coffee shop. Well, I want to say a couple things. One, I think a lot of people who are in cannabis, first and foremost, put too much emphasis on that being the reason why people go to Amsterdam. Amsterdam is by far one of the most beautiful and historic places I've ever been in my life. Some of the most friendly people, the most beautiful, like the flower, the tulips that they grow in Amsterdam are far more impressive than the cannabis. So if this does happen, just so you know, California's here for you, children. You guys can always come here. There's a bunch of other legal states that will allow your canna tourism, so you don't fuck up this historic, beautiful place that has very limited resources and very limited water and very limited place to put you, and doesn't want to deal with the chaos, is pretty much what it sounds like. So, currently, they have no idea if the dark cloud around cannabis sector in Amsterdam is going to lift. The council just spent a day debating whether to ban tourists from its cafes, such as coffee shops of the Rockies, where the state currently turns a blind eye to foreigners smoking weed and taxes the profits. I've always wondered exactly how it went down. So I kind of did a little bit of digging today too, because I've known that they've turned a blind eye to the whole thing, because essentially this is all being taxed in through the restaurant or their cafes as an exorbitant other tax, essentially. So we just love the city, says Fakwat 26, we come for the museums and the people and the ambiance, not just to smoke. But it's nice that it's legal and well done. There's good quality weed and a lot of respect from people around it. Not thought of, though, the same for everyone. The mayor of Amsterdam, who is the last word on the law and order, wants a temporary ban on non-residents in coffee shops by enforcing national residents-only rule known as the I Cetirum. Even though we will be in no majority for the ban when the council votes on Wednesday, Halsam has not given up. In her view, and the way of the local heads of police and prosecution bodies, banning tourists from coffee shops is unavoidable in order to reduce the size of the soft drug sector, tackle tourist nuisance, and attack the hard drug criminality. A recent study suggests that 100 of the capital's 166 coffee shops, in effect, serve only the needs of tourists. Now that coronavirus travel measures have gone, the red light districts is a rowdy place as ever, and that is increasing to pursue pressure to tell people that are wanting a moral holiday to go elsewhere. And I feel like Amsterdam with the red light district has already done that. So I don't necessarily feel like banning cannabis tourism makes a ton of sense with the prostitution available in the red light district the way it is. I'm not saying to stop any of it, but if you're saying that the hard drug problem is being inflected by or being caused by cannabis, you're sadly mistaken. So in April, a 13-page policy proposal, the mayor asked for the council's support to temporarily enforce the residents-only law, largely because of concerns about the criminal backdoor of the coffee shops. Smoking and processing weed for personal consumption is tolerated, but commercial growing is not. So coffee shops must buy from criminals. An influential 2019 report on the capital's dark side suggested revisiting the residents-only rule to help tackle its urban jungle. Others fiercely disagree. Mark Jacobson's co-owner of the Rockies believes the hard drugs have nothing to do with this sector. I've had my coffee shop for 30 years, and the moment that customers do anything with cocaine, I throw them out, figuratively and literally, he told the council. I like that was the thing that was mentioned at council. Others worry about street dealers increasingly, especially as Amsterdam and other cities try to protect vulnerable young men from crime. Apparently, there's been a bit of an issue in regards to trafficking and people being forced to traffic in and out of Amsterdam with some groups is something that has been being reported. But I'm super curious to see how this actually pans out. They are going to be voting on it, and we will be finding out here pretty soon whether or not Amsterdam is going to stop access to tourists for cannabis in Amsterdam. And like I said, if you do want to go on a holiday just so that you can get high, there's 14 states here in the United States that will accept you. So I'm Nicole West, getting high at 9 with y'all.
Yeah, if you're looking for somewhere to go, come and see me. I'm the president of cannabis tourism for the city of West Hollywood, your ultimate cannabis destination.
I think it's going to be very interesting the way this whole thing plays out with them, because they're going to lose out on a lot of money that a lot of other European places, and it's really easy to get around in Europe. Just pick up the slack. I think Germany is going to be a choice, place to go, like for Oktoberfest plus cannabis lounges as well. I think Germany is going to be a major hub. It's not too far, and then the other countries that they'll probably fill that void.
I think it's worth noting that there was only 166 in the entire country. So like the idea, or the entire city, the idea that it's that big of a pull, there's more dispensaries in like Denver.
There's more
dispensaries
shops
in Denver than that. And like Denver makes good money off of it, but like it's not, I don't know, it's not everything. And they're not taxing it. They're not taxing it as well as they could be if they were actually allowing for it to happen. To be quite honest,
I feel like we hear this story come out of Amsterdam every election cycle where they try to bring this up and try to hate on the weed stores, and they're the vein of the existence in Amsterdam. But yet they've done a really good job throughout all these years.
I just think it's interesting that the red light district isn't under question about the hard drugs conversation. And
they pick their
I feel like prostitution is more likely to involve hard drugs than weed.
Is there evidence that hard
American
drugs are increasing in Amsterdam? Is there evidence of hard drugs increasing in Amsterdam?
It was saying that they've been trying to battle this issue for a long time, and that this is something that they're trying to tackle, and that they're having a problem because of this.
Well, I think one of the things, if Amsterdam really wanted to tackle this, they should change one of their laws, because one of their laws is what most of the people sell to tourists is they sell fake drugs to tourists, and it is actually not illegal to sell tourists fake drugs. And that's what a majority of the people out there are doing, is selling fake cocaine, fake Molly, fake this and that, because they cannot get prosecuted.
Oh yeah.
We're
going like after you make your point, you just want to go right into the advertisement.
I felt like it was right on time. So let's go.
Did you hit the left? Did you hit the left button instead of the right button there, Jason?
All of a sudden I got triggered and my trigger finger popped off.
Oh man, you're so triggered.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome to Los Ashes, the headiest city in America. Los Ashes is a 10-pound smokable city curated and created by the world-renowned roller Weavers. In the past, Weavers has amazed cannabis lovers with his roll jobs, such as a smokable 5-pound rocket launcher and a 10-pound Darth Vader. But now, Weavers is rolling an entire city. Have your business featured in Los Ashes with a ton of different sponsorship opportunities available. Contact Weavers at smokablecity.com for full sponsorship information.
The thoughts and opinions and general shade thrown on the High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers, not those of any other speaker or its followers. The statements made do not constitute legal or accounting advice, or speakers make no representation regarding the legal status of any substance in a country, area, territory, or its authorities. Views expressed in this room do not establish fiduciary relationships. Our sponsors do not imply, constitute any endorsement by us of the expression or any opinion whatsoever on the part of any speaker or anyone on stage. If you're an easily offended person, this show is probably not for you. Also, fuck off.
Flying into LAX and you want to taste some of the best weed in the world? Then stop by LAXCC, the closest dispensary to LAX, located at 8332 Lincoln Boulevard and open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Always make LAXCC your first stop when you touch down in LA and score like a winner. And don't forget to tell them I sent you and mention you'd like to get high at 9 for 10% off your full order.
She's well known in certain DC circles for cooking up excellence and baking delicious treats. But don't let the apron fool you. Our next correspondent is still a feisty redheaded conservative with proven long-form Mayflower roots and an unhealthy, safe banking love and affection. Coming to the stage is the founder of Panoptic Strategies and our very own Washington insider, Gretchen Gailey. What you got for us on this beautiful Monday morning? Great to see you.
Good afternoon, Rico. My headline is coming from Marijuana Moment. GOP senators block marijuana security clearance protections in defense bill amendment, prompting sponsor to file broader measures. While the Senate prepares to take up a must-pass defense bill, marijuana reform is in the mix in several respects. As part of advancing the National Defense Authorization Act, leaders are also seeking to attach separate, broader intelligence legislation that had included a provision preventing the denial of security clearances over cannabis when it was approved by a Senate committee earlier this year. But now 2 GOP senators have protested the inclusion of the marijuana language, and it has been dropped from the measure, prompting the sponsor to separately file new, broader amendments on the issue. One of the latest proposals from Senator Ron Wyden would prevent the denial of federal security clearances for people over cannabis use at any time, while the other would limit the protection only to people who admit to past use prior to entering national security vetting. The House passed its own version of the NDA in July, and that legislation included provisions on marijuana banking, psychedelics research, veterans medical cannabis access, and more. On the Senate side, Wyden filed the new security clearance amendments on Wednesday after Senators Chuck Grassley and John Cornyn raised an objection to attaching the Intelligence Authorization Act to the NDA if it's included his previous marijuana security clearance provisions that was approved by the Intelligence Committee over the summer. 2 Senate sources confirmed that objections from Grassley and Cornyn were the reason for the cannabis language being dropped from the new Intelligence Act amendment to the NDA. Marijuana Moment reached out to the GOP senators' offices for comment, but representatives were not immediately available. Some form of cannabis is legal in almost every state at this point, yet our federal laws are stuck in the era of reefer madness. People seeking clearances to serve their country should not be disqualified for cannabis use. This is coming from Senator Wyden. He says our national security depends on the intelligence community's ability to recruit the best people for the job. I hope Senate Republicans will get out of the way and get on board so we can make these common sense reforms. Cornyn separately blocked a House-passed bipartisan cannabis research bill from an expedited Senate floor vote this week by raising an objection to its consideration under unanimous consent. A House source said the action wasn't necessarily reflective of Cornyn's position on the legislation. Rather, he is reportedly planning to hold up any House bills from going to the floor under unanimous consent in response to the House not advancing his own bills. Meanwhile, when it comes to the NDAA, one of Wyden's new amendments stipulates that use of cannabis by an individual shall not be determinative to adjudications of the individual's eligibility for access to classified information or eligibility to hold a sensitive position. The second, more limited amendment that Wyden is sponsoring alongside Senator Kirsten Gillibrand only applies to past marijuana use. It says that the use of cannabis by an individual that occurs prior to the individual's initiation of a national security vetting process shall not be determinative to adjudications of the individual's eligibility for access to classified information or eligibility to hold a sensitive position. Wyden's earlier Intelligence Authorization Act amendment had already been watered down in committee prior to being adopted. As introduced, the senator's measure would have prohibited any federal agency from denying or revoking any individual's eligibility for access to classified information solely because of past or present use of cannabis. It was changed to make it so only past cannabis use would be covered and that the protection would only apply to people who work for intelligence agencies rather than any federal agency. I'm slightly surprised by Senator Cornyn if the previous analysis was that he was not targeting cannabis. This kind of looks like the man is targeting cannabis. Dr. Felicia, you asked me on Friday what were some of his bills in the House that are being held up. And I looked into that. Currently, he has 17 bills that are being held up in the House. So I could see why the man is a little pissed off. But I really don't understand his reasoning and why he's taking it out on cannabis. As for the other amendments to the NDAA, like safe banking, like access for the VA doctors and folks to provide recommendations, research into psychedelics, all of that is still up for grabs. We will not know till probably after the elections if they are going to make it into the NDAA. That is when it will be coming up for real discussion and a vote. I say if people want to bitch at someone, they need to start bitching at Senator Cornyn and reach out to his office in Texas and say, why do you hate pot? This is Gretchen for High at 9 News.
Oh, Gretchen, I'm so glad we finally got to the bottom of why Senator John Cornyn is being such a stiffy.
I have no idea why he's so pissed off about it, because it does seem he's going after cannabis, especially since the two amendments that were already approved by the Senate to be a part of the NDAA.
Because it's a familiar
but now
Biden,
the amendments that Wyden is proposing to take the place of what was in there are more broad. And so if they get in, they're just shooting themselves in the foot because they were watered down in the first place. So
I think I know why Wyden is gunning for this. Or excuse me, not Wyden, but Cornyn. Yeah, I think I know why Cornyn's going for this is because there is no electoral consequences for him in the state of Texas when it comes to cannabis policy. Right.
Part of me was debating if it has something to do with Beto, if it has to do with the bigger
it very well could.
In Texas.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, I have definitely talked about this with a number of people, and the fact that Beto O'Rourke is running on legalizing all drugs, which is, you know, whatever. But nonetheless,
he is not running on legalizing.
He's running on legalizing all drugs, bro. He's running on legalizing all drugs, bro. He's a crazy liberal. He wants to take your guns and give you all the drugs and just have everybody be dope fiends in the streets of Texas.
He's a crazy conservative that wants to arm everybody up to their gills so they can go shoot up everything that they see in their sight.
Jason, are you sure it's not decriminalizing all drugs?
No, he wants to legalize all drugs. I'm pretty sure. I mean, to me, it's the same thing.
I think it decriminalized. I think it was decriminalized. I think it was similar to what's happening in Oregon. They didn't legalize all drugs.
And look at what a mess it is up there in Oregon.
I mean, it was already a mess, bro.
That's where they have the city of Chad.
Bro, Oregon was already
It goes both ways. Let's pump the brakes on spreading that bullshit right there. That is not true.
I'm just saying, bro. He wants to legalize all drugs.
I can only think it has to go back to the state argument in Texas. I can't think of a real reason why Cornyn would get in the way of these two particular amendments. They aren't out of line. They should be part of the NDAA. It's nothing bizarre. So
because it's the party of no, they have to say no to something rather than rather than use their time to be constructive and put out actually decent policies for people to actually debate on. They're gonna go back to that familiar punching bag and just keep on saying we can't do this because this is gonna hurt people. This is going to kill all the children. Blah 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 blah.
Well, I don't agree with your assessment of party of no, simply because there are like 15 other cannabis amendments that are still alive in the NDAA. Why do you select these two?
Well, let me rephrase that. They're the party of no when Democrats are in charge. They're the party of whatever the fuck you say when Donald Trump is in charge, and then all bets are off when it comes to fiscal conservation and all that other stuff. Am I right?
It's called fiscal conservatism, Rico.
All that shit.
No,
Jason.
no.
It would be nice.
Sorry,
Even Dr. Felicia,
no.
Dr. Felicia is telling you no.
No, I'm not. No, I'm telling you no, Jason.
Hey!
Republicans always drive up the deficit, and Democrats always bring it back down.
Right.
No, look at this inflation right now that's happening. That's all because of
you give tax breaks to the rich and powerful,
before Biden
throw
got
up the deficit, and then every time a Democrat has come in and clean up the mess and leave
know
with a
about all that.
surplus. Look at it.
I'm not buying that.
Inflation
Not buying what you're selling,
before
Dr.
Biden
Felicia.
even got into office, man. It happens every single time. But you know what, Dr. Felicia? Conservatives don't respect facts.
What?
We're the ones that live in facts.
We're the ones who make them up.
Exactly.
I mean, come on. We love that.
Exactly.
Yeah. We make all the facts, bro.
I like that, Gretchen. You make them up. I like that a lot.
We make all the facts because you guys all live in fantasy land full of pixie dust and glitter bombs.
I think when it comes to this story, it will be interesting to see if Nancy Pelosi would pass some of Cornyn's bills. Will he get off his high horse against cannabis? Or will he have to come up with another excuse?
You know, the thing about with Cornyn to me is like, I expect this type of behavior out of, oh my God, what's his name from Arkansas? The senator from Arkansas.
Tom Cotton.
Tom Cotton. Yes. Thank you, Rico. I expect this type of behavior out of him, not out of John Cornyn.
Why?
Because Tom Cotton is a super hater on everything weed. He's and he's the number one. Hold on, Gretchen. He's the number one senator who puts anonymous holds on bills all the time and holds up the Senate all the time. He's the number one at that.
Would you say they're cute anonymous holds on bills?
No.
We got to keep this party going, Jason. Who's up next?
Oh, yeah, that's right. One visit to this office is sure to get you all kinds of access to blue pills. All shapes, sizes, and colors are always included and welcome in this safe space. She's the Plants for Life CEO and a dual board certified physician, always promoting cannabis as medicine. And if you play your cards right, she'll mix some yellow ones with your blue ones for a greener experience. That's right. It is none other than the Dr. Felicia Dawson.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for that introduction. Happy Monday, everyone. My headline comes from Benzinga. Oklahoma suing pregnant women for consuming medical cannabis. By Nina Stinjak. Since 2019, at least 26 women in Oklahoma were charged with child neglect felonies for consuming cannabis while pregnant, according to the Frontier. The punishment for this crime can be life in prison, though the previous offenders who pleaded guilty were given probation. Of those 26 women, at least 8 were medical marijuana license holders, meaning they were allowed to legally buy and use cannabis, having a doctor's recommendation. Nevertheless, the problem boils down to whether medical marijuana can be treated as an illegal drug, because if it can, the law is clear. Pregnant women can be charged with child neglect for consuming illegal drugs while pregnant. Women in Oklahoma have been prosecuted even after giving birth to healthy babies. Wait a second. Isn't medical marijuana legal in Oklahoma for registered patients? That's right. Those who have a license from the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority are allowed to buy and consume marijuana, and there are no rules prohibiting pregnant women to use cannabis or have a license. According to state law, physicians are not obligated to determine if patients are pregnant or planning a pregnancy soon before they provide them with a medical marijuana license. On the other hand, medical marijuana products in the state have warnings against use during pregnancy, similar to those on cigarette packs. Most medical professionals agree on advising against using marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol, and other drugs during pregnancy. Brian Hermanson, one of the 2 prosecutors in Oklahoma who has brought charges against those pregnant women, believes this is a felony. If they make bad decisions about using drugs while they're pregnant, they're probably going to make other bad decisions when raising the child, he said last November. Ryan Keisel, a civil rights attorney and former Oklahoma lawmaker, on the other hand, thinks that these prosecutions are inconsistent with state law. Those women are protected as medical marijuana patients under the law, Keisel said. It's important to remember if you have a medical marijuana license, you are under the care of a physician. The number of women in the U.S. who turn to cannabis while pregnant has notably increased over time. Between 2002 and 2017, the figure went from under 6% to 12%, as per data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. What about Oklahoma? The numbers don't look great. Since the state legalized medical marijuana in 2018, the number of state newborns who tested positive for cannabis grew by more than 160%. And I believe it was 28 out of 1,000 babies who tested positive were positive for cannabis. What are the impacts of cannabis use while pregnant? Unfortunately, there are not enough relevant scientific studies on this topic, thanks to some of these senators who keep blocking cannabis research, as marijuana couldn't be researched for a long time because of its status as Schedule I substance. More and more studies indeed indicate there are negative consequences to children whose mothers consume cannabis while pregnant. It is hard to confirm that the consequence came only from cannabis use. As Dr. Mishka Turplin, who has researched substance use in pregnancy and has helped develop American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists guidance on addiction, says, the impact of marijuana exposure can be very hard to separate from tobacco use, stress, and any other health and environmental factors. After all, women are advised not to take any legal drugs while pregnant, like painkillers or alcohol, right? It is not so strange to see women smoking a cigarette with a huge bump. I don't see that very often, but okay. Even though the negative consequences of cigarette smoke to unborn children has been known for a while now. What about stress? And yet no one is prosecuting pregnant women who smoke or drink. Well, isn't that a bit hypocritical if childcare is the main concern in these prosecutions? I agree with you, Nina Stinchak. It is hypocritical to ignore alcohol and tobacco while lumping cannabis in with cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines that truly have little medicinal use and high risk for abuse. Cannabis, on the other hand, is medicine, which helps with dozens of conditions. These two district attorneys are only adding to the mother's stress and the psychopathology of their children with their lawsuits. Women will be too afraid to get prenatal care, which will only contribute to more bad outcomes. There are new studies coming out. However, they are using the same old cohorts, which were poorly put together and failed to tease out and test cannabis products, delivery methods, and other confounding variables like anxiety, depression, and stress. They are assuming that cannabis is causing any and all bad outcomes. Just last week, a study came out about hyperemesis gravidarum causing anxiety, sleep problems, ADHD, autism, small brain size, cognitive and motor problems in children whose mothers suffered from hyperemesis gravidarum. Most of these are the same conditions that are being attributed to cannabis. I don't blame healthcare providers and even more poorly informed elected officials who know nothing about cannabis and take the research at face value. They don't know that cannabis has been used for thousands of years in obstetrics by women and their providers. They don't know that physicians, including obstetricians in this country, prescribed cannabis for 100 years before prohibition took place. They're going to take the research such as it is at face value and keep running on that hamster wheel until they get the okay from the powers that be that cannabis is all right. Meanwhile, women and their children will suffer until more carefully planned research that controls for confounding variables is available. Finally, I'd like to remind women who are considering using cannabis in pregnancy that even if you stop months before you delivered, like the young lady in this story stopped at the 3rd month of pregnancy and her baby's stool still tested positive for cannabis. Be careful. Know your state's laws. This is Dr. Felicia Dawson reporting for High at 9 News. I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this matter.
So recently, the state of California put out an update in regards to our warning. We have a warning on the back of cannabis that is a Prop 65 warning. We have two different warnings. We have our state government warning, and then we have our Prop 65, which is the Toxic Air and Water Act of 1986 that's turned into like, here's all the shit that can cause you cancer or reproductive harm. And they're actually going to get really aggressive with making sure that they use the long form, because there was two versions of this disclaimer, and they're because of it not being descriptive enough for it just says cancer or reproductive harm, but it's like, that's not enough. Like, you have to get much more descriptive to kind of like cover the liability side of it, because they don't know, and they're afraid of, I'm sure, people like this coming at it where it's like, oh, there's all these problems, and it's like, well, you have to be able to go through the process of giving that disclaimer. But it sounds like the disclaimer is giving them the reason to try to come after them, or lack of disclaimer.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. And I go through a long checklist of things that women can do to have a more healthy and pleasant pregnancy before I even talk about cannabis. But the research that we have is just not indicative of the real experience. I mean, a lot of the research is retrospective. When people only had access to the illicit market, a lot of the research is synthetic isolates, which don't behave the same as the full spectrum plant does. So,
do you feel like
it's a problem?
Do you feel like places should get the research to find out it's bad before they stop it? Or like, some places are just like, hey, until we know, we're just going to say no, right? We're just going to say a hard no until we know. Or alternatively, like, hey, there's not enough research. Why are you banning it? Like, because that's kind of like the two different sides, right? Where you look at it and you're like, we don't know. Don't let anybody do it because we don't know.
I think they're going to have to do the labeling. I think for now, because of the research the way it is, and it's federally illegal, your hands are tied. And until we get better research, everybody's hands are going to be tied. We're going to be stuck with it's going to be stuck with the status quo.
It's going to end up looking like a British pack of cigarettes where there's like a dead baby on it or something.
I'm good with that. I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem with that. I'm all good with those labeling.
Putting a dead baby on a jar of weed?
If that's what they say, if that's what they say you have to do it. I mean, people are still going to buy it regardless. I mean, look at Europe. People still buy cigarettes with all those pictures on there all the time. No hesitation to buy them.
It's America, though, and in America, people react a lot more emotional to shit like that, as we can see on very mundane conversations. People react to. We're a young country, so we haven't seen and have reacted to it all yet, like everybody else. So people tend to get scared when they see shit like that.
Yeah.
I just want to point out this doctor's name that you referenced, Dr. Felicia, Dr. Miska Terpland. Because I'll tell you what, I miss Terpland too. I can't wait to go back.
I think this is just another example of this country's war on women. I mean, this is just some bullshit. This has nothing to do with pot.
Oh my God. Can we please clip that? Because I need more conservatives to say that shit. The war on women is indeed, and it's being waged by white conservative men.
What about remember the one that was the law where you had to show your pregnancy test that you hadn't, the one that they were trying to pass? Alabama, yeah.
An obstetrician lawmaker was proposing that law.
Proposing that in Alabama, that in order to buy weed, you had to bring a pregnancy test saying that you were not pregnant. I'm like, that's the most invasion of privacy fucked up thing I've ever heard in my entire life, to buy weed. Like, fuck you. Fuck you.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
right after all these COVID restrictions and everything like that, like, you're still putting forward this kind of shit towards women.
Yeah,
but there's this huge conservative backlash against any kind of COVID mandating. So like, what is it this or is it that? What's up with y'all?
I don't even understand where you're going with this, Rico.
That is a great way to segue to our
mandate.
Where I'm going with that. What?
Yeah. That is a great place for us to segue into our closing of the show. Thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. Yeah, we got to pick our fucking battles, I think. Okay, thank you for getting high at 9 with us Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big shout out to our audience and supporters, to the haters for still talking about us. Huge thank you to True Classic, Weavers, and LAXCC for helping us keep the lights on. Thank you to the correspondents for being amazing, and to Cannabis for giving us a reason to do this. And to 3 is 4 for helping us create a space in this cannabis miniverse. And thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us.
Don't forget to pay your taxes.
You are tuned in to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebs and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and enthogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck, Rico Lamitte, and Nicole West, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you for getting high at 9 with us.